No nation has ever taxed itself into prosperity. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is the state of the country's economy. Where are we really heading? Does the government have a plan for the future? We saw the taxes on telecommunications increasing. We saw the value-added tax increasing to 15% from a flat 12%. We saw the nation-building tax being reintroduced, stands at 2%. Again, a big question mark as far as the election promises are concerned. Will the cost of living really increase in the future? Do we have the right environment for foreign direct investors to come into Sri Lanka and invest? Do we have the environment suitable for local entrepreneurs to come up with such taxes being introduced? Does the government have a vision? Let's discuss all this and more with our panelists today. Let me introduce them to you. Professor Rohan Samarjeva, founding chair of Learn Asia. Nice to have you on board, Professor. First time on the show. Looking forward to grilling you in the next 1.5 hours. Also joining us this evening is Mr. Anushka Vijayasinghe, Chief Economist of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Again, Anushka, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Joining us this evening is no stranger to the show, Mr. Rusiripala Thendakon, Senior Banker, advises the panel about how we should move forward in terms of the country's economy, has done so in the past as well. Looking forward to hearing from you as well. Mr. Thendakon, joining us again this evening is retired Colonel Channa Veerathunga, spokesperson of the Seafood Exporters Association of Sri Lanka. Nice to have you on board as well, Mr. Veerathunga. I assure you the next 1.5 hours is going to be very, very gruesome 1.5 hours, and I hope and pray that you brace yourself for the next 1.5 hours. Nice to have you on board as well. Let's start off with Mr. Rusiripala Thendakon, Senior Banker, who knows the format of the game and who knows the format of the show. Mr. Thendakon, starting off, we just got an approval from the International Monetary Fund for a $1.5 billion standby arrangement. What does it really mean for a country like Sri Lanka? Does it mean that we got rich by $1.5 billion US? Your time starts now.
Yes. Thank you, Chami. I think we are going to discuss a very interesting topic tonight, discussed by almost all the people in the country. Even if some don't discuss, many and all think about it, this subject that affects them. So it's very nice of you for your channel to have a session of this nature on this subject, which is of interest to the entire country. Regarding the question that you raised and about the economy in general in the country, I think this is we are experiencing a very, very strange situation and an unprecedented situation at that from my point of view. Why I say this is, now you in your question, you put it to me that with this 1.5 billion that is expected from the World Bank, IMF, whether we will be okay thereafter and everything is quite off henceforth. Well, the situation is far, far beyond the truth. That's not the situation. This facility in the first place we are getting from the IMF is a sort of a facility that is given at the sort of in the last stages, as this is called this is an extended facility, and I think this is one of the last facilities that we can take from the IMF when the country is in dire states, or any country as a member of the IMF. So this is given to make us breathe first. This doesn't give, and this in no way is coming to or going to help or solve all our problems that the country is facing economically. There are many strings attached to these type of facilities. They give this breathing space for the country by itself to adjust and do its own exercises to bring up the economy. If one thinks that this is given as a line of support and this is all and then we are free thereafter, that is not so. There is much to be done. There are so many strings attached to this. There are conditionalities attached to this type of facilities. And the country, we have been put to the pool, okay, now swim. Now we have to do that. and we have to show the results. So this is the situation, this is the actual nature of the facility, and this is what we have to look forward to.
Mr. Nikon, the government views this as a victory for them. Is this something to be proud of, to obtain the 1.5 billion standby arrangement from the IMF?
Well, looking at certain things that this government is doing, I'm not surprised the way that they are trying to canvass this to the public, because I think they are drifting along from the time the government came into being, started. You see, with regard to the economy, there is no sound prophesied policy for the economic development or the movement of the economy in this country. So they are giving hopes, they are creating hopes, they are telling stories, they are telling various things to the people by way of consolations, but they don't mean anything as if they are not panaceas for the prevailing situations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rusirpal Thanekon. Mr. Thanekon is a senior banker. I now move on to Professor Rohan Samarjeva, founding chair of Learn Asia. Professor Samarjeva, is the country's economy in dire straits? The time starts now.
Yes, our exports are down. We had a big consumption boost between the elections. Most of that money actually went to buy things because the non-necessities usually in this country come from outside. So that would affect our trade balance. We haven't done enough to improve our export situation. Our foreign direct investment attraction, many people thought that this would pick up very quickly. It hasn't picked up. We have had a lot of flip-flops and uncertainty with regard to policy, which I think is one of the reasons why investors are somewhat careful. I do realize the overall global environment has also changed, but we have been going all over the place. We've done retrospective taxes, we've done entity-based taxes, we've put taxes, we've reduced taxes, then we've increased them again. My head is swirling. I can't quite figure out what is going on the taxation side. So with all this uncertainty, I think the signals are not being given for what we must do, because I think it's very clear what we must do. What we must do is create jobs and exports. That is the bottom line. That's how we get out of where we are. In order to do that, we have to open up markets. We have to create the conditions for investment. Open up markets, I think the government has done something very good. The European Union, the opening up the fish exports, that has been a good move. I would say that's one of the good things that has come out in the last little while. But after seeing the conditions attached to GSP Plus, I'm somewhat pessimistic about that happening, because they seem to have thrown the kitchen sink at us in terms of conditionalities. The Indian agreement, I think we need it very badly, but there's unnecessary amounts of friction around that. We should have run it together with the Chinese agreement. We should have done it together with several other agreements. This government has been, if you take the current composition of parliament, they've been in power for 9 months. Enough for a baby to be born. I think you've got to say that it's time for us to see some concrete results.
Compared to the previous years, do you think that we've fared well, or you think we've not done enough in terms of the country's economy?
In my view, most of what happens in an economy doesn't come from the government. It comes from the individual economic actors. And people have been building their houses, they have been buying their cars. That consumption stuff is happening. But if the government gets its act together, it'll be easier for these people to do more of that. And we have been very successful in giving these people the freedom to run.
Professor Samarjeva, before I move on to Colonel Chana Viratunga, I have another one question for you. In 2014, we had a foreign exchange reserve of 11 months in terms of our imports and against our imports. But here we are, not even being able to have 3 months to survive. Why is this? Does that mean the former president was a better economist than our present Prime Minister or the President?
I don't think that's a very useful way of looking at these things. And these months of foreign exchange, I mean, these are abstractions. What we really will need to look at is what is the debt burden? What is it? What is the foreign investment coming in? What is happening with exports? Those are concrete things that we can do something about. These things are just abstractions.
Thank you very much, Professor Rohan Samarji. We'll of course talk a little bit about this as the day progresses, the next 1.5 hours. And now move on to retired Colonel Channa Veeratunga, a spokesperson of the Seafood Exporters Association. Professor Rohan Samarji has said that it was an opening move as far as lifting of the EU fishing ban is concerned, Colonel Veeratunga. Has the government been really able to secure this yet, or the fishing ban is going to be lifted in the next few months? Where do you stand now?
In short, Shammi, the fishing ban is being lifted.
It's not
a one-go thing, it's a process. When the ban is imposed, it is a process. It took 2 years for them to impose the ban, and it takes about 2 to 3 months, according to our understanding, to lift the ban, because it has to go through internal process of ratifying by the respective countries in the EU membership, and it will take about 2 to 3 months. We are hopeful that we will be able to export by end of June or early July.
How do you view the efforts taken by the present regime to get this ban lifted?
Actually, Shammi, I should tell you the history about this ban first. This is mostly technical to our understanding. This is about the illegal, unreported and unregulated fishery that is going around in the entire world, especially in the international waters. You know, we have several international waters around the world, and ours is Indian Ocean. And the Sri Lankan fishery for a while, I mean for a long period of time, has been fishing in these international waters. And around 2005 to 2008, the world fishing nations have been discussing this matter, and they have been introducing the laws and regulations to combat this illegal, unreported, unregulated fishery.
What did this government do differently? You said it's very technical. What did this government do differently?
Actually, in 2008, European Union introduced their laws, national laws, to combat illegal, unreported and unregulated fishery. And they found Sri Lanka by that time was one of the largest exporters to Europe. I should say second largest exporter to Europe. And they informed by giving us a yellow card that you have no regulations, you have no laws, you have no sanctions, you have no observers on board in your vessels, you have not abide by the regional fishery management organization resolutions as you have agreed, and you also not have abide by the UN laws of sea. But you are fishing in international waters in large scale. We have the largest fleet in the Indian Ocean, about 1,500 to 2,000 vessels. That is about 20% of the entire fleet in the Indian Ocean. And they gave us time to rectify these things. But by that time, we were trying to do something, but it was not sufficient.
But must credit go to the present regime for being able to get this ban lifted? Or is it the activities of a few to get this ban lifted? How do you view this?
In short, yes, the present regime should get the credit, because it was on the 15th of January 2015 that the Prime Minister appointed a steering committee, which was a very powerful steering committee, with the Fisheries Ministry, the Defence Ministry, the Foreign Ministry, and everybody was there who were related institutions, including the private sector. And
Colonel Veeratunga, you said that the government played a big role to get this ban lifted.
yes,
Usually we see the UNP regimes doing a lot of hard work on the ground to get bans lifted. However, they seem to not have a policy forward. Is it the same case now? Does this government have a policy?
well, with regard to lifting of ban, they did lot. I cannot say much about the policy, but this is
Yes or no, very quickly, before we move on to Anushka.
yes.
Does it have a policy, yes or no?
Well, with regard to seafood export, yes.
They do have policy.
Yes, they have a political will. There are problems. There are issues.
But
We are
political will
discussing.
alone is not sufficient.
Well, that itself is not
Thank you
sufficient.
very much, Retired Colonel Shana Veeratunga, for your thoughts as well. I now move on to Anushka Vijay Singh, Chief Economist of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. Anushka, you represent many private sector organizations in the country. Professor Rohan Samarjiva said there is a lot of uncertainty. I did not pose him the question whether if he was an investor, whether he would invest, but I'm posing that question to you. If you were an investor, would you invest in a country like Sri Lanka, given the present conditions? Your time starts now.
The short answer, Shamir, is yes.
You would?
Absolutely.
And why?
If you're willing to look beyond the uncertainty for what Sri Lanka offers. And I think over the last 1 year, at the Ceylon Chamber, we've been getting investment delegations from countries that had never been here before, from sectors that had never shown interest before. And for them, very clearly, they see Sri Lanka's geographical location, market access, potentially agreement with trade agreement with India and China, being key reasons why they would invest here. And they're very keen. We had an investor conclave in March, fantastic response. But they're absolutely spooked by policy flip-flops and uncertainty. In fact, just today the Chamber released a fairly strongly worded statement, and we are going to engage with the policymakers on it as well, that highlights this very issue. And the line we took was, listen, a lot of things are going for Sri Lanka. We still remain as a bright spot in Asia. We still remain as a bright spot in South Asia in particular. There are all these reasons, as I said before, for Sri Lanka being an attractive place, but those are all under risk because of policy uncertainty. And you know, in Sri Lanka, even the Sri Lankan private sector, many of them continue to be here, continue to operate fairly successfully, even during the war. So majority of the private sector aren't expecting a magic wand to be waved and, you know, economic miracles to happen. At the very least, they're expecting policy certainty, consistency. Announcements on policies were put forward, then retracted, uncertainty in decision making, and I think that's a really unfortunate way to let this investment opportunity go. But a lot of investors are very keen, and if you ask many of them, they'll say yes, but fix this policy uncertainty.
With policy flip-flops taking place, with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce issuing a strongly worded document, according to you, to the policymakers of this island nation, saying that you all have to get it right, Anushka, would you still go ahead and invest in a country like this?
Like I said before, absolutely. And that's exactly the feedback we're hearing from all of these folks who are coming to see us. And you know,
you had a conclave in March, you said before. How many investors have said that they would invest in the country, and what is a time frame in which they would invest in the country?
We had about around 110 foreign investors. None of them told us they are not going to invest. All of them paid money to be here. It wasn't a free event. Just come and meet. They had B2B sessions where they met Sri Lankan joint venture partners, and all of them were keen to invest in a variety of sectors. However, of course, we haven't gone back to them to ask how long are you going to take. Some of them will be quicker than others because it's sectors that are more obvious, like in tourism, real estate. Those have been the hot sectors where the opportunity is clear. But in other areas, like in manufacturing and so on, they're still taking a wait-and-see approach. And that's not only because of the policy uncertainty. It's also because, you know, Sri Lanka is going through this middle-income transition. We're not a cheap place to manufacture anymore. We don't have cheap labor. They're looking to say, okay, what is it about Sri Lanka for these other sectors that make it attractive? And this market access is proving to be something that resonates very strongly with. And as Professor Samarajiva said, we need to get these trade agreements done to make it attractive for
Anushka, you seem
investors
to be very
locate here.
optimistic about the country's economy. I want to ask you a question. You have $500 million in your hand. Where would you invest your money?
A country or a sector?
A sector. In Sri Lanka. Where would you invest your money? You seem to be a very optimistic person about the country's economy and
I
how
would
it's
invest
moving
it.
forward.
I would invest it, of course, without all the due diligence and all of that. Immediately, what comes to mind is logistics and international logistics, into leisure, tourism, certainly, and ICT services, niche services. I think Professor Samarajiva would be able to highlight more on this. But those right now seem like no-brainers to do.
Understood? My second question to you is, $500 million, you get to invest in any country in the world. Where would you choose?
Any country in Asia.
In the world, you can choose any
Absolutely.
country in the world. You have $500 million. Where would you invest?
Any country in Asia. And of course, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking to access a big market, naturally you go to India and China. If you're looking for a country that is signing on to TPP with the US, you'll go to Vietnam. Every investor makes a decision based on what makes sense to them. And that's why Sri Lankans...
You're very young, Anushka. Again, I'm posing this question to you. Which country would you choose if you want to make money in 2 years? Would you choose Sri Lanka?
Of course. Shamir, I think you're asking a fairly narrow question, because it all depends, and I'm not caveating it, it all depends on what sector you want to be in. And like I said, there are these sectors that make very clear value propositions in Sri Lanka. And if you have $500 million US dollars, you put it into, and you're looking at those sectors, Sri Lanka is a very good bet. If you're looking for other sectors, other countries will be a good bet. So I don't think we can just
Thank you very much,
give a headline
Anushka,
now.
for your thoughts. If I was you and I was given the option of investing my money somewhere, I would definitely choose a very good bank and invest my money at the moment, and then
certainly not a European bank, because you'll get negative interest rates.
and at least have some interest being paid to me for sure in the next few years, and then decide as to whether Sri Lanka is the best bet to invest our money. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your thoughts in the first round. Let me introduce our journalist this evening. On to my right is Nadine Maji, joining us as always. On to my left is Chaturang Haporachi, young and vibrant Chaturang Haporachi. And on to my far left, for us, unfortunately, I won't be able to say young to you anymore, but investigative journalist who's doing a lot of work for Newsfirst in terms of hosting our show and also appearing on the front line on Saturday on MTV. Faraz Shagutare, nice to have you on board as well, Faraz. Let's start off with Faraz for a change today.
Thank you, Shamir. We'll go for Professor here. Professor, if Sri Lanka is such an attractive place, as the young Anushka says, why is it that all these foreign visitors are coming to Sri Lanka and going back without actually making the investment? Where is the FDI? Why are they coming and going back?
I think the answer, I think he gave the answer. You didn't want to listen to him. What he says is that if you are looking in manufacturing, Sri Lanka is not the ideal country at this time.
So surely they know that when they come
have
here.
labor shortages.
Yeah.
So if you are looking for logistics and perhaps tourism, I would really place all my bets on the logistics side. I think Sri Lanka is the place. I'm looking for somebody to come and take Mattala, for example. I think we should be very close to that. It's really silly if somebody doesn't take that as a air freight logistics hub.
But perhaps they're put off because they must have read the reports that this was used as a paddy storage facility.
I don't think those kinds of things are going to weigh. It's more important is that the complete liberalization up to the 7th freedom has been given. You can do anything you want in Mattal. It's one of the most liberal airports in the entire world.
So why is it that 1.5 years later this government is having trouble in attracting somebody? We've had other events like an Audi or a Volkswagen plant, which nothing has happened about, and it's difficult to understand why. because we have India exporting 1 million cars from the same plant.
Yeah, but I mean, manufacturing plants you don't turn on a dime to set up a manufacturing plant. I think we have a problem of expectations as well. Even you build a hotel, can you get the hotel up and running in 15 months?
Or is it?
Can you get a manufacturing plant up and running in 15 months?
Professor,
I think not.
is it that the government's PR machine is so powerful, like Mr. Rusripala was saying earlier?
No, the president was very clear. He said, our problem is we are not communicating. I don't think it's a powerful PR machine. I think it's a misfiring and ineffective PR machine. I don't think they're communicating anything.
So all these people are coming here and then finding out that we're too expensive to manufacture.
Manufacturing is going to be a hard run for Sri Lanka. I think we have to, I personally think there would be, in particular sectors, there would be labor shortages. So unless the conditions are right, there isn't labor. You can have factories. I can tell you something that I was involved in, which is getting the BPO industry going in this country. 10, 15 years ago, they could never fill the seats. Even in a business where you actually stay in an air-conditioned room wearing nice clothes. Manufacturing is not like that. Our people are not very much into manufacturing. This is going to be a real challenge. There's everybody, including the Prime Minister, who want to do manufacturing in this country. I'm saying fine. But the only way we can do manufacturing in this country is niche manufacturing tied to the supply chains in South India. There are political problems in achieving this. That is going to be the challenge. Nobody seems to understand. They think you're going to have factories that will be standalone. Nobody does standalone factories now. These are not like the Seat rubber factory. Nowadays, what you have are global value chains. And you need to participate in these global value chains. You need trade agreements. Our trade negotiations stopped in 2007, 2008. And for the last 7 years, the whole machinery is moribund. Nothing is happening.
Even now, nothing's happening?
I'd like to see the results. So when you have something where the whole machinery is corroded and nothing is happening, you can't get it up and going and at full steam.
So do you see,
as quickly.
Do you see?
I wish it was going faster, but I don't see it.
And why is that? Why do you think is holding it back?
Implementation is the key, and I think that's the real weakness. To some extent, I disagree with the president's diagnosis. He says it's a communication story. I think it's an implementation story. When I looked at these numbers, I looked at the previous UNP government. They came into power in November of 2001. They had enormous political issues going on. They were dealing with the ceasefire. What did they do in 9 months? What were they able to announce in 9 months? What were they able to do in, if you take the president's term, that has been 17 months. What were they able to do in 17 months? In hard circumstances. I would say that the implementation record of the previous UNP government is way better than the implementation record of the present one. The machine is not firing properly.
Colonel Veeratunga, as a businessman yourself, I want to ask you about, there's been a lot of talk from certain persons in the government about strengthening manufacturing in the country. Do you think it's sustainable for Sri Lanka, from a businessman's perspective, do you think it's sustainable for Sri Lanka to be so focused on manufacturing?
Well, we have to, I have to stick to my area of expertise, and also I can...
But from a businessman's perspective,
yes.
For example, let's take the seafood sector.
Yes.
In seafood, do you agree that, for example, that in Sri Lanka we should go into large-scale manufacturing, maybe set up seafood farms, or are you more in line with Professor Samarajiva's thinking, where you're niche manufacturing?
Of course, Sri Lanka should be niche manufacturing, because we can't even employ one person. We can't afford to, because now to compare a vessel that belongs to Sri Lanka is 4 to 5 tons, 5 metric tons, whereas a person catch 3,000 metric tons in one go. You can imagine the investment that goes into this vessel. We can't afford to.
So when you said that the government has a policy with regard to the seafood export sector,
yes,
what is that policy? Is it niche manufacturing?
Well, it should be. It should be, because we can't be manufacturing quantities. We don't have the investments, and in the world, if you take fishery, the fishery investments are going down because we are curtailing the fishing efforts in the entire world. So therefore, you can't be manufacturing other than farming. Of course, we should concentrate more onto farming. We have been discussing with the government, promoting farming. That also need a lot of investment. However, Sri Lanka should be manufacturing for the niche market, quality products, not quantity based products. Sri Lanka, in any case, I believe personally, we don't have space for manufacturing. We don't have raw material for manufacturing. We should be more onto trading while doing the manufacturing for niche markets, niche products.
Mr. Tennakoon, sorry Chatwang, I'll let you go in a minute. Mr. Tennakoon, from the perspective of a former banker and financier, do you believe that, do you agree with what the gentleman has said, that we need to shift focus to a more trade and services oriented economy rather than manufacturing heavy?
Certainly, the directions have to be very carefully thought of in the context what we are faced with today. The labour market is very important. Our situation in the world market situation is very important, and how we tie up with the other countries developed in these fields is also important. So everything depends on how we sort of focus the issue, how we focus on the issue. It's not just saying that, manufacturing is better than trading or something like that. Everything depends. The investment and the planning and the role that the government has to play depends on all these factors put together. So therefore, it is a concerted effort with more application, concern, and with proper planning. What we have to do at the moment is that.
From the point of view of a banker though, if someone were to come to you seeking a loan to start up a business, let's say in manufacturing, one person comes to you with an idea to set up a factory making, strawberry milkshakes, let's say, and the other person comes up to you with an idea of establishing a trade and services business, maybe in logistics. As from the point of view of the banker, which one are you more inclined to give the loan to? The person who's going to set up the factory or the person who's going to set up the logistics business?
I think both are important. You can't put one against the other, but because in
the climate in Sri Lanka,
the long-term effect,
taking all the variables into
In a minute, but we'll finish with
the long-term effect of the decision is based on what the result is going to be, how you analyze it to be. In that way only we have to sort of decide which one we prefer against the other. But I would like to tell you one thing. For us to decide on these things, the climate and the background created in the country should be correct in the first place. Let me tell you just one example. A foreign investor who is really interested in bringing some investment into the country, when we make inquiries and when we send an invitation to him, okay, please come, the things are changed, we are in a new setup now, what do you think? He writes back and says, just one example, no, we are really scared, your goalpost is shifting every night. And he also says, well, there are too many midnight gazettes. Now, this is just an example. So what does it mean? The climate has not been created by the people in authority.
Yes, Anushka, your thoughts?
Yeah. You asked if someone was to evaluate these two, a strawberry milkshake factory versus in logistics. If we were able to say, if that factory was able to say, we have the best strawberries with the best technology and this is the best strawberry milkshake, and we are not only able to sell it to Sri Lankans, I mean, how many strawberry milkshakes are Sri Lankans going to drink, and we can export it to the region, then I think that's a great business to invest in and a great project for a bank to give money.
Strawberry milkshake
But
is just an idea.
logistics, I'm going with your example. But on logistics, if the investor was looking for a strategic location in this region, so close to extremely busy shipping routes, a commercial hub act which could potentially make us very attractive from a regulations point of view, Maktala with the airport, seaport, industrial zone nexus, let's say being a warehousing facility for e-commerce companies in China to locate here and cater to South Asia, if that was the kind of company, yes. So my point is, it all depends on who we're trying to attract. What do investors look for in a country? They look for, what is the market? Do we only get to sell into that market, Sri Lanka, or from that market can we go to other markets? So trade agreements, do we have trade agreements? They'll want to know about the labor, cost of labor, skill levels, can we get labor, and we have to see whether that's, whether Sri Lanka, what it has going for that. And they'll of course also want to know about policy, predictability. And if we are failing on that front, no matter how attractive we are, there will be investors who are turned away. And that's absolutely right. But the point I'm trying to make it is we cannot generalize. And we have to attract the right investors, not the kind of investors who we could attract before by giving token tax incentives, a little bit of help here, giving very generous tax holidays. They came, enjoyed the tax holiday period and left. It was fly-by-night operations. Those are the kind of investments we should be looking for. We should be going after the folks, the good investors that are coming for good reasons.
Thank you very much. The government moving towards...
Chaturanga, yes. Mr. Tenakon, since Nadim took 5 minutes saying he would only take one, I'll quickly ask this question from you. I want to zoom out a bit and ask you a question about the IMF loan which we discussed in the first round. Now, is the IMF providing us this loan out of unconditional love and ardent affection, or are there indirect burdens that would be imposed on the people who are, you know, at the end of the day, Sri Lankans, us? Would there be indirect burden on us?
Chaturanga, we are a member country of the IMF, like many other countries. You see, it is an accepted principle that when a member country, when a country is joined the IMF as the member, there are certain things that the member has to undergo by way of that agreement. You know, now Sri Lanka is a member of the IMF, and every year, whether we like or not, we are subject to a certain surveillance by the, under certain constitutional requirements of the IMF, we are subject to certain surveillances. Now, this is, I mean, what we are subject to immediately is called Section 4 surveillance, which is, you know, done every year by a team of the IMF in any country serving as a member of the IMF. Now, when that is done, why they do it is they want to find out that all their members are performing okay, because one country creating a problem will cause that problem or extend that problem to the other members as well. Therefore, to see that the others are free, the IMF will intervene and come into the country and see, by under this surveillance, how this country is doing. So, once we are subject to that surveillance, they find that our balance of payments are bad, that our foreign exchange situations are going bad, that various other factors that they assess us on are going bad. So in such a situation, there is no other remedy other than to bring some salvation to that country by extending a loan facility. What we are getting today is one of the last resort, you know, from the IMF.
Sham, 2 quick questions to Colonel Veeratunga. Colonel Veeratunga, is the lifting of the ban on fisheries exports from Sri Lanka, is that important to Sri Lanka? Is it important to us?
My God, very much important.
Now,
this was...
Yeah, now since the ban was imposed, you said that the current government has taken steps to somehow lift this ban again and get the exports going.
Yes.
Do you think the effort taken by the government is enough when it comes to this process?
Well, yes. That is why the EU Commission agreed that we have fulfilled the conditions required to lift the ban, where the laws are amended, regulations are introduced, sanctions are introduced, then observers are introduced to the fleet, the UN law of sea requirements are met,
According to you, sir, when do you think the government realized this and started acting on lifting this ban?
Actually, as soon as the government came to power, I think on the 15th of January 2015, the most powerful steering committee that I have seen in my life was appointed by the Prime Minister on the 15th of January 2015.
17 months later, the most powerful steering committee that you have seen has been unable to get this done. Am I correct?
My personal opinion is it is little late, but the ban, they have announced that ban will be lifted.
Why are we late? Because there is no proper procedure?
No, it is not only a procedure. First, it's a legislation. Legislation is the primary thing of a country. In the past, we did not have. That is why we given the red card. We did not have the legislation. We did not have the laws to enforce.
And now the situation has changed.
The situation has completely changed.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. But before we go in for a short commercial break, a question to Mr. Rusiripal Tennakon. Mr. Rusiripal Tennakon, I posed this question to Professor Rohan Samarjeev as well, and he said that it's just an abstraction, you should not be concerned about it. 2014, we had 11 months of foreign exchange reserve against our imports. We were able to keep the economy afloat in the year 2014, which is a known fact. And now, 3 months. And that is why one of the reasons that we took the IMF standby arrangement as well. Is this a component that we should discard, or is it something that we should keep in mind when we're moving forward?
I'm afraid it is not, it is not that simple. A country's ability to supply or serve its import requirements at least to a minimum period ahead of a given date is a very crucial factor for the survival of that country. So therefore, it cannot be just discarded saying that they are just figures. That is one way of measuring your ability to serve the people, to service the requirements of the future, of the human beings in that country. So therefore, it cannot just be discarded by saying that it is just a figure. It is a figure, all right, but that's a kind of measure as to your capacity to serve the people in their bare necessities. Because we are depending on so many imports for our survival. Definitely, I mean, beyond the...
Who is a better economist? Is it the former regime or the present regime?
Well, I don't want to make a comparison, whether it is not the regimes, those people, the central banks,
it's the central bank governor,
the treasury, all these put together compose a unit, that decides on the policy of the country.
Who had the best team?
In a country.
Who are the best team?
I think they have been there for the last previous regime has been there. They have been surviving very difficult periods, and they have been there for nearly 10 years. I mean, if you take that particular period, 10 years. But after the war, after the settlement of the issue, northeast issue, the country was progressing in a fairly acceptable manner, not according to our standards, even according to the surveillance reports by the World Bank standards. Country was progressing to some extent, in the positive direction from a very bad situation. That is why they commented in their 2015 report, which they discussed with Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe, Ravi Karunanayake, the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, Governor of the Central Bank, all put together. They were discussing the previous year's report, and in that report they say, well, your balance of payments have improved from this year to this year. There are going to be pending risks due to the increasing debts, but the situation was well under control in their own words. In their own words they state that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tennakon. But before we go in for a break, I want to give an equal opportunity to Professor Rohan Samarjeev to respond. Cannot be discarded. The figures cannot be discarded.
Sure, you have currency swaps with India, you have the IMF arrangement. These kinds of things have to be done. But I did mention that there was a big consumption boost between the two elections. And that the consumption boost actually resulted in, you can see on the roads what happened as a result of that, right? Cars, three-wheelers, two-wheelers came in large numbers. So that's what really happened. We bust our budget, basically. That's part of this.
Do we have a budget
so-called democratic processes.
Do
The
we have a
auction-
budget
what do
now?
we call it? The auction of non-existent resources.
Do we have a budget now? My question to you is, you said the government has a proper direction. You told for us that the government has made a lot of awareness about what the direction is. We had the finance minister making the budget speech 2 weeks prior. We had the prime minister making a speech.
Are you quoting me or are you talking
No,
about somebody else? I'm the one who introduced the word flip-flops.
No,
to
you
this
said-
conversation.
you said the government
I didn't
is
say the
creating-
government has got a solid
You said the government was creating awareness about the economy, the country's economy.
I'm sorry, you seem to be listening to somebody else. I said
You just-
that even their communication is ineffective. I said,
You
I
said
used
the
the term
communication
flip-flops.
was-
I said communication is ineffective. I said implementation is problematic.
Is it because communication is ineffective because you have the prime minister making a speech 2 weeks prior to the finance minister making a speech in parliament? Is that why? Is there
I was
confusion
quite
there?
surprised by that. I have to admit, I was extraordinarily surprised by the mismatch between those two documents.
Thank you very much, Professor
Samir,
Rohan
if I can
Samajid.
very quickly
yeah.
responding to your question on whether we should discard this or not. I think what we sometimes miss when we talk about the foreign reserves position, and I'm not going to get into who managed it better, but we have to look at what happened in 2015. When you are looking at external reserves, foreign reserves, what happens in the external environment matters hugely. And in 2015, we had the biggest historic outflow of funds from emerging markets, including Sri Lanka, $700 billion US. That was a huge factor that impacted Sri Lanka as well. You had the US Federal Reserve announcing that they're going to taper the US the quantitative easing, and that sent the markets into a tailspin. And countries pulled out and investors pulled out from emerging markets. That hit Sri Lanka as well. You saw China's growth being uncertain. That affected markets as well. So I think it's important to remember other things that happened in 2015 that made Sri Lanka, this small country, also get caught in this in this whirlwind and also get hit, because it's not the export performance, of course, and that's not just 2015. That's something we're grappling with today as well, and we will. But on the other side of the foreign reserves is capital, and the capital outflows were not just from Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much, Anushka, for your thoughts as well. We end the second round. We move on to the third round after this short commercial break. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation.